is my honor and great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for the evening, Dr. Skip Downing. I met Skip several years ago when I received an opportunity to present at an on-course workshop in Raleigh, North Carolina. Little did I know, the man has his own conference, limited to about 500 people, and I was in awe of all the teaching strategies that I learned. I could not wait to get back to Blaine College to put them into action. It changed the way I delivered the format of my teaching to my students. Dr. Downing, you might want to know, is an international consultant in the field of faculty development and student success strategies. His popular text on course, Strategies for Creating Success in College and in Life, is used in both student success courses and college writing courses. He has earned degrees from Princeton University, Johns Hopkins University, the University of Santa Monica, and Carnegie Mellon University. He holds advanced degrees in both English and counseling psychology. He was professor of English at Baltimore City Community College for 32 years. In addition to his role as an academic instructor, Dr. Downing created and coordinated BCC Student Success Learning Community Program. These programs teach students how to apply proven strategies of success to achieve their full potential in college and in life. The College Success Program resulted in significant increase in both student academic success and retention. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Skip Downing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Glad you're here.
Well, it's awesome to be here because just think how amazing it is that you gather each year for the purpose of learning more, if you can, to help your students more. It's an admirable gathering. And I've had the joy of working with educators all over the United States, and I don't know of a state that does the work that TCCTA does to bring you together. And so congratulations. So I want to explore a topic that I've thought a lot about in my now 4 decades in higher education. And that is, what makes a good teacher? And as I ask these questions, you fill in the blanks for yourself. What makes a good teacher, or what is a good teacher? What makes a better teacher? What makes a teacher better? And what's the best teacher? I'm going to start out by getting your thought process going by showing a very short video. One of your favorite YouTube channels, I suspect, rateyourprofessors.com. And the interesting thing to me about this short video, and these are going to be professors reading the criticisms their students have of them, but I'm going to propose that the answer, at least for me, in this video, there is answers to what makes a good teacher, what makes a better teacher, and what makes the best teacher. So what I'm going to ask you to do is see if how many of these, there are about 6 or 7 teachers in this short video. See how many of them you can remember, and see if you can flip these negative examples over, because that's what I'm going to try to do, to define good, better, and best. So let's watch the video.
Bah! I found this course to be tediously boring, and Steve was useless, although he is a very nice guy. Consolation prize.
She will mock your aspirations, then cackle over the remains of your spirit.
Before I attended his class, I thought he was a women prof.
If you want to get a good grade, avoid her, or you will get sadness. Some people are destined for sadness. ...
Boring. ...
Good lecture, ugly shoes.
He's hot in during the lecture, but after lecture he's super cold.
Brian is terrible at explaining material. Don't let his stunning good looks and humor fool you into thinking this is an easy course.
Wouldn't you love to be on YouTube reading what students criticized you for? So, does being a good, better, or best teacher have anything to do with the shoes you wear? Yes. Okay, I'm in the wrong place then if this... That's the right answer, thank you. So, that's kind of idiosyncratic, I would say. How about the idea of somebody who gives bad grades? That's kind of predictable, because students are obviously very concerned about their grades. But I'm going to take three of the others, and I hope you remember some of them. You remember Professor Jones said, Brian is terrible at explaining things. And I'm going to suggest that the opposite of that is what makes a good teacher. I had a student in my office one time, and he got talking about one of his other professors. And he said, you know, Dr. X is brilliant. He is just brilliant. I said, really? I mean, I had respect for my colleague, but I frankly never thought of him as brilliant. And I said, so why do you say he is brilliant? And he said, well, I go to his class 3 times a week for an hour each time. He talks high speed the whole time, and I don't understand a thing he says. So he must be brilliant, right? I don't think so. I had an experience like this myself. When I was do any of you teach statistics? I took statistics. You teach? Oh, goodness. I remember my professor stood up in front of the board with his back to the class and solved more problems. I thought he was getting paid by the problem. I thought he was brilliant because I didn't have a clue what was going on. Years later, I went to graduate school, and I had to take statistics again. And I had a wonderful teacher, Ron Holnick, bless his heart. And he actually could explain statistics. And while I had barely passed, and that's a whole other story how I passed the first one, but I got an A in graduate school in statistics, and that blew me away, but I give full credit to Dr. Holnick because he explained it so clearly. The problem that we get when we become experts is sometimes called the curse of expertise. And what that means is that we get so familiar with our subject that we forget what our students don't know, and it makes it really difficult for us to explain to them. I came across a quote from a psychology professor from Carnegie Mellon. I went there, but I don't know this guy. But he said something I think very profound. He said, experts can articulate only about 30% of what they know. That's pretty interesting. Suppose he's wrong. Suppose it's 60%. That's still amazing. This is a problem when designing courses because the experts creating them cannot adequately explain what they know to novice learners. That's the key. The gap between the expert and the novice is such a gulf. It's like the novice is on this side of the Grand Canyon and the professor is on the other side, and he's screaming across, or she's screaming across, and hoping that some of it's getting to the other side. So I'm going to pin my answer to what makes a good teacher. Even though I know there are lots of other things, I think it's great and obviously essential that we know our subjects thoroughly, but let's hope that we didn't get here without getting that much. To be able to give really creative assignments that get students excited, to give helpful feedback to keep them on course, to evaluate fairly. These are all important too, but if I had to pick one thing, I would say good teachers are really good explainers. So what makes a good teacher become a better teacher? I'm going to go back to the video. I'm going to mention a couple. Perhaps you remember this. I found this course to be tediously boring, and Steve was useless. ... Boring. ... So, you're all such dynamic teachers, you've probably forgotten what it is to be in a class with a boring teacher. So I'm going to show you a short video. And I want you to, here's your assignment. I want you to imagine that the person sitting next to you is the person in this video. And when the video's over, I'm going to ask you to turn to each other, and you have 1 minute to make a suggestion, just one suggestion, of what this person should do to become a better teacher. Video, please.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Isn't the picture of the drool just delicious? That's wonderful. All right, turn to that boring teacher next to you and give him or her one tip. All right, good coaching. I hope you passed on some good suggestions to your professor friend. So I want to flip this over, and I'm going to suggest that better teachers, instead of boring their students, engage them at a very high level. They get them excited. They're the kind of teacher that when the class is over, the students look at their watch and say, "It's over already? How did that happen? How did it go so fast?" Let me tell you an interesting study that I came across by two researchers called Johnson and Percival. What they did was they observed 90 lectures by 12 different instructors. And they created questions that were correlated with the time in the lecture. So like questions for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, all the way through the lecture. And then they gave these quiz questions to the students to see how good their recall was. And they watched the recall, which was very strong for the first minute, and it began to dip and dip and dip. And somewhere between, what would you guess? It wasn't even 20. Somewhere around 10 minutes for many of the students. Now, all the students, of course, weren't not the same. But between 10 and 18 minutes, by the time it got to 18 minutes, the recall was practically zero. Which, by the way, if you didn't know, that's why the TED Talks, I lost that word for a minute there. That's why TED Talks are 18 minutes maximum. The man who owns and runs TED Talks realizes that after about 18 minutes, your eyes have glazed over. Now, the nice thing about a video is you can shut it off and watch the rest of it later. But one of the things that I think makes a teacher better is that the lecture is minimized. It's not abolished. It's not gone completely, but that it's minimized. And here's some interesting data about what's going on with that in higher education. In 1998, 3 researchers named Finkelstein, Seal, and Schuster polled 172,000 college and university professors and asked them, do you make lecture as your primary mode of teaching? Imagine what answer, what percentage would you think? 90%? 90 is a little high. 45 is a little low. 75 is so close, I got to give you the golden ring. It was 76%. Now, that was 1998. In 2014, the Higher Education Research Institute at UCLA did a similar poll. And what do you think it was? Do you think it went up? Think it went down? It went down really quite an astounding amount. It went down to 50.6%. So if you're still lecturing exclusively, you are still in the majority, 50.6%. So how can we get people to engage your students more? Well, you gave some advice to your neighbor. I would just give, in 1 minute, I would say, break up your lecture and do something that gets their brains engaged again, and then you might have them for another 18 minutes. But maybe after 10 minutes, do something else, show a video, ask people to turn to each other and talk about something, and then bring them back to the point you want to make. And you can probably go on for a lot more than 18 minutes and keep their attention. Now I'm going to move on to what I consider to be the best teachers. I've had a few of these in my life. I suspect you have too. And I suspect you've been the best teacher to some of your students. Do you remember Professor Didicher said in this video we saw earlier, she will mock your aspirations, then cackle over the remains of your spirit. How'd you like to have that on your tombstone? Yeah? The students that we teach have troubled lives, most of them. They have huge obstacles in their way. The fact that any of them graduate is incredible with what most of them have to deal with. So I want to share with you a short video to remind you of these kinds of students. It's about a 4-minute video of a woman who was talking. Actually, she was talking at the conference that I host, that Essie mentioned. And she was sharing part of her story with a group of educators there. And she met somebody as a teacher, and you'll hear her talk about this person, who was very much like Professor Didicher, who cackles over the remains of her spirit. And you'll see. And as you listen to her, her name is Annette, and as you listen to Annette present, imagine what you could do to help her. Would it help her if you explained things more clearly? Maybe. Would it help her if you got her more engaged? Maybe. But I think you'll agree with me that her problems go even deeper. So let's listen to Annette.
This is my story. Miss Turner, my 7th grade teacher, math teacher, she lives in my head. I haven't seen her in more than 30 years, but I can still picture her on that day when I went to her desk at the front of the room. Her skin was fair and her hair was brown and long. Her eyes were hazel, and I can see her elbows on a big wooden desk. her eyes staring off into a distance, clicking her nail finger against the nail finger of her thumb. When I asked her to help explain the math, she turned and waved my paper at me and told me I was too stupid to learn the math. All these years later, I can still hear her words. I have no idea why you come to my class, Annette. You're never going to pass math. You're just stupid. Then she dismissed me with a wave of her hand. You see, I grew up in Houston, Texas, in the 70s, where college was something that rich, smart people did. It wasn't for a poor, barrio Hispanic child living there in this barrio. In our neighborhood, there were no talks about going to college. Conversations were about drug dealers, drive-bys, and the latest girl that got beat by her husband. Our biggest goal was to survive. Like many of my friends, I dropped out of school. I got married at the age of 15 and had 2 children by the time I was 17. After my brother got his GED in the military in the 80s, he talked me into getting a GED. That diploma qualified me for a higher paying job, working in a chemical plant as a security guard and loading ATM machines. But they were laboring jobs that required physical labor, and I didn't like them very much anymore. Now, fast forward my life to 2005, and that's when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. The doctor said I couldn't do the work at a physical job anymore, and I had to become eligible for a rehabilitation program that offered me the opportunity to attend college. When I started my first semester, at the age of 46, I was overwhelmed and scared. The campus seems huge, and I was intimidated by all the young students and the academic requirements that I didn't understand. The teachers, when they said, "Here's your syllabus," but I had no idea what a syllabus was. My English teacher told us to do our research paper in MLA format, but I had no idea what that meant. I didn't ask because I figured everyone else knew, so I pretended I knew too. I walked around the campus with my head down and I watched the cement. If I had a problem and someone didn't ask, "Can I help you?" I would just figure it out on my own.
So think about Annette and how to help her. How do we help all of the Annettes? I can't tell you how many students that Annette represents for me. And I suspect you can identify with many students that you've worked with. The traditional answer of helping students that are struggling are to give them study skills, to teach them about the resources that the college makes available. Those are very important things, but I don't think either of those is what Annette needs at that point. What Annette needed was to be re-empowered, not to have somebody cackling over her spirit, not telling her she was stupid, but the exact opposite, the flip of that, telling her about her greatness, giving her skills, not just fancy talk, not just positive thinking, but some positive skills that she could employ. And I began to lean in this direction back in the 90s. And it wasn't as popular then, but since then there have been numerous studies that have suggested that these factors, which are now being called non-cognitive factors, which have been called soft skills, which have been called 21st century skills, which have been called essential skills, which when I first began working with this idea, I called inner qualities. But whatever you call them, there's incredible research about how important they are. I'll just give you a little bit of it. Robert Vallerand and Robert Bissonnette are 2 Canadian researchers who studied 1,000 Canadian first-year students. And they gave them an assessment which determined their locus of control. As you probably know, the locus of control determines whether you think it's a mindset, Whether you think that you have control over your outcomes and experiences, or you think that somebody, some powerful other, or even luck, has power over your life. And so they divided these students, in particular, look at the ones at the extreme. These are the ones with the outer locus of control, thinking their lives are controlled from the outside. These are the inner locus of control students. And they came back a year later to see which of the groups were the most persistent. And which group do you think it was? Inner. When they believed they had control over their destiny, they were more likely to be still there. One of my favorite studies, Walter Mischel at Stanford University, some of you have probably heard about this, is called the Marshmallow Study, right? That's the short term of it. So they bring little 4-year-olds into a room, and they plunk a marshmallow down in front of the child, and they say, I have to leave the room for a few minutes. If you want to, you can eat this marshmallow right now. If you can wait till I get back, I'll give you another marshmallow. You'll have 2 marshmallows. So they run this experiment with lots and lots of little kids. It divides them into 2 groups. The 1 marshmallow kids that have instant gratification, boom, they pop it in their mouth. There's some wonderful videos of this replicated on YouTube, and it's so cute to see those little kids just going crazy trying not to eat that marshmallow, and then they'll pop it in. My favorite one was the little girl that put it in her mouth and sucked it for a little while, and then she put it back. So we've got the 1 marshmallow and we've got the 2 marshmallow. They track these kids for years, and then they happen to look at their SAT scores. And the 2 marshmallow kids, the ones that had the ability to wait, scored on average 210 points higher on their SAT scores than the 1 marshmallow kids. Non-cognitive. I'll give you one more. There's a wonderful ongoing study called the Dunedin Longitudinal Study. It's being done with people from New Zealand. And they took 1,037 kids, all born in the same year, and they've been studying them now for about 40 years. And they've done all kinds of things. I mean, they've looked at them from every angle they could look at. They probably have things inside of them looking out. But here's one element of this that's really interesting to us. They assessed their self-control. How much could they control their urges, to control themselves to do the right things? And so they divided these into actually 4 quartiles. And we're going to look at the top quartile and the bottom quartile. The top quartile was 95% of them graduated from high school. How about the bottom quartile? What would you guess? 95 versus? It wasn't quite that bad. 58%. You're being contrary. I get it. 58%, just on that factor alone. And the Nobel Prize winning economist, James Heckman, has looked at the data from the Dunedin study, and he came up with this conclusion, that the factors that contribute to a college graduate being able to graduate, the non-cognitive factors are equal to the cognitive factors. That's pretty amazing, because how much energy do we put into the non-cognitive factors? So I got interested in this. That's what On Course is about. When I first published On Course in 1996, it wasn't really very popular. There's a rumor that most of the books bought the first year were purchased by my mother. I think it's probably only partially true. But last year, over 100,000 students took a course with On Course. And over the years, one of them was Annette. And she ran into one of the best teachers she could have run into. Her name is Gail Janecka. She taught at Victoria College here in Texas. And I'd like you to see what Annette had to say about what happened after she got in the course.
One of my courses was called Strategic Learning, where we read the on-course. In class, I learned to overcome my fears and accept every challenge placed before me. It helped me become armed with the belief that the choices I make and the strategies I use will determine what happens to me. I learned to combat the scripts in my head that were saying, you're not smart enough, you can't do this, you can never be a good college student. I replaced those negative thoughts with, I can do this, I will do this, and whatever it takes to get the work done. Only I can change my path. It's a good thing I had this class because I was also taking math. And Miss Turner was still in my head telling me I was stupid and I would never pass math. Instead of giving in like I had when I was in her class, I tried my newly learned strategics, and with determination, one thing I did was take an inspirational quote from the on-course, and I wrote them down and placed them on my home wall workplace. When I feel like giving up, I read them out loud. Then I remind myself that I'm just as smart as my younger classmates, and I can accomplish my dreams just as well as they can. I'm doing whatever it takes, even if it means spending 40 hours in a tutoring center. Maybe I'll never be a math student, but I did pass that class with a B. I am now in my 4th semester in college, and I walk around the campus with my head held high. And when I see another student who's confused, I offer them help. I even use some of the on-course techniques to encourage other students who have the same obstacles I had. The course made me a stronger person, and it helped me change my life. Still, I get sad when I realize that I believed Miss Turner for so long. I wasted a lot of years listening to her, criticizing me in my mind, and for a long time, I let her steal my thunder of achievement. Thank you.
So this has a happy ending. I love happy endings. So Annette graduated from Victoria College. She went on to Texas State University. She graduated from Texas State University. And she is now working on her master's program at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. And I've gotten to know Annette over the years, and I wonder where she'd be today if she hadn't run into one of the best teachers in Gale, who shared with her her trust in her, her belief in her, and re-empowered Annette to be the kind of learner she certainly was when she was 2 or 3 years old, before she got all those negative messages that crushed her spirit. By way of closing, I have some suggestions for how you could possibly take these thoughts into the conference and make the most of the conference. So the 3 key terms that I've given you are explain, engage, empower. And what I would suggest is that every session you go to, wear a filter. And the question you could keep asking yourself is, how could I use this, whatever the presenter or the group is doing at the time, how could I use this to explain my subject more clearly to my students? How could I use this to engage my students at a higher level so they wouldn't be bored? They'd be excited about learning. And how could I use this to empower students to be able to make the choices, like we saw with Annette, that will lead them to graduate, to go on to get a 4-year degree, to go on to master's programs, and make a wonderful contribution to the world. So I think if you do those 3 things or have those 3 filters, it may even take the wonderful experience that you often have here up just another notch. Thank you very much.